Welcome to today's special webcast. I'm Amy Abel with the Conference Board. I'm very excited to welcome you and joining me on this really special webcast around the future of learning of work. I'm very excited about this topic because it brings all the passions that I love. You know, whether it's learning and development, it's about coaching, it's about new technologies. So all of these we will hit on today's webcast. It's a great topic. You're going to really, I hope, think about what our current trends and shifts that are going on in our world and our businesses, but then also what it means for the future and for ourselves as well as for the people that we support in our organizations. So let me jump into that by first telling all of you what we will answer some critical questions and issues for today. What are the changes going on in our society, right? Whether it's consumers or employee expectations, what does the learning industry need? What should we know? Why should we care? What should we know? What should we be thinking about in our day-to-day jobs as well as for our organizations? How will it impact all the work that we do, the investments, what our employees are asking for from a learning and development perspective? And again, why should we care now? What's going on in the world? Lots of shifts. So lots of big and broad topics, and it's just going to be a great conversation. Those of you that are joining that would like credits, you can see on your screen. Please type in your name and email address and the type of credit that you would like, and we'll take care of it in the studio here. And so before we continue into the content, let me introduce my guest for today. Terrific to have Nick Goldberg, who is the CEO of Work-Life Labs. Nick's mission is to make businesses better, and he passionately believes that good leadership and in turn an engaged workforce are the strongest drivers for making that happen. I just love that phrase, so thank you for that, Nick.
Thank you.
As CEO of Work-Life Labs, Nick enriches lives by building solutions that make one's work a place people love to be. I definitely would appreciate that, right? Why wouldn't we all want to love the work we do and the place that we work at? As part of Lehigh Harrison, his organization works with ideas and technologies from across the world that will change the industry for a generation. So I'd definitely like to hear more about that. So thank you, Nick, for joining me.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
I also want to welcome Chris Harrington, who is Senior Vice President for Lehigh Harrison. Chris is responsible to working with some of LAH's most complex clients on their workforce transformation needs. That's got to be a busy job. During Chris's career in human capital management, he has worked extensively with Fortune 250 organizations to help them navigate business transformation with an eye on unlocking human potential. There's work in coaching, rewards, talent development, engagement, all of these great topics that we're very concerned about in our businesses, and we'll definitely touch upon them today. So thank you, Chris, for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
All right. So why don't I turn this over to Nick to jump us into the conversation about what's going on in our world for learning, and what is this having big impacts in our world? What should we be thinking about?
Yeah, absolutely, and I'm really excited to talk about that as we go through. And I think at Lehigh Harrison, one of the things that we really wanted to focus on was the future of work. We're an organization that has been supporting our clients for over 50 years with fantastic solutions around coaching, around leadership development, around outplacement. But we needed to figure out how to take all that fantastic work and marry it with the latest thinking and technology to really find ways to scale that. And one of the things that we're constantly thinking of at Lehigh Harrison or at Work-Life Labs is, what makes people want to learn at work? What makes people enjoy that user experience? And then we often think about, if we take work and life, and that's where Work-Life Labs comes from, in life, we use technology every day. We are constantly on our mobile phones or our cell phones. We are leaving the office and using fantastic applications and having a fantastic user experience. That's not always the same at work. And if we want people to learn, we need to figure out what that gap is and how to build a bridge between this fantastic content and coaches and experience and credibility that we as an organization have, but figuring out how we can use technology, but technology in a way that people will actually use to deliver some fantastic solutions and fantastic learning to people. So Work-Life Labs, our role really is to look both at content and learning, but also travel the world and think about what technology, how are people using it, not just in learning, but across different places. So that's what we do. And ultimately, as you said in my bio, and it is something I really do believe passionately about, if work is somewhere people love to be, then they're going to enjoy it more. And if they're enjoying it more and they're far more engaged, they're going to be far better at their jobs. So that is a big part of what we do.
I like the way that you phrase that, because we all know that our world is just drowning in technologies, and we're not going to avoid it, but how do we bridge the two, right? How do we work with technology to really make our lives better, and whether that's at home or at work?
Yeah.
And so I hear that in your passion and in your goals, so thanks for that.
Absolutely. And I think just to add on to that, one thing to think about, and we'll go in, I think, into a polling question now. Mm-hmm. At home, technology is a huge enabler. Technology helps us in so many ways, whether it be ordering a taxi, ordering a movie, buying something off a retailer. It's made our lives so much better and so much simpler, and not necessarily the same in all walks, in all the stuff we do at work. So I think we're going to go into a couple of questions now.
That's perfect. That's exactly right. So if the control room can add the polling questions to our audience, please let us know what you think. From the polling perspective, what is your favorite app that you use in your personal life? So I imagine this is a pretty easy question, and all of us, I'm sure, surround many of these apps that you see on the list. So if I can ask the control room to give it just another 5-6 seconds, if you could all type in and enter in, which you're already doing. So first, thank you very much. And you can see there's a high aggregation around a couple of them.
I'm happy I'm not alone with Amazon being my favorite app.
So if the control room can close the poll, please. All right, so you can see from the audience participation, about 54% on Amazon. So that's by far the largest volume on this list, followed by Netflix, and then followed by other, as well as Uber. So I think all of those are pretty popular. We can just imagine. I can certainly support the Amazon view myself, so I can certainly understand that. And I wondered from either of you whether this would be fairly familiar with other groups that you connect with.
Yeah, absolutely. We've looked at this a lot, and the poll represents what we see from most of the people that we talk to. Yeah. And I think the question we would always ask is why is that? What is it about these applications that make them so popular for people? And if we think about Amazon, Amazon actually, I don't know if people know this, but they patented the one-click purchase. So Amazon actually, if ever you see a one-click purchase on any other retailer online, Amazon are actually getting a cut of that because they've licensed that technology. And that's actually one of the reasons why people like using Amazon, I think, is because it's so easy, it's very intuitive. Within 2 or 3 clicks, or even 1 click, you can buy the item that you want. And of course, then the customer experience and customer service that comes after is fantastic. And we're actually going to talk about Amazon a little bit as we go through this presentation, as to what it is that really gets our loyalty. But I think overall, one thing that's very in common about all of these applications is they're so easy to use. Okay, they're intuitive, they're easy to use, and the user experience is fantastic. We don't think twice about going on there to do what we need to do.
Yeah, perfect.
For me too, one of the ones, I almost take it for granted. I have a new credit card, but I hadn't yet uploaded it to the Uber app yet. And so this morning, of course, I'm logging into Uber, and I'm going to get an Uber here to the conference board office, and it's not up. I have to upload my credit card into it. And so I hadn't done that. I couldn't find the credit card, so I had to use my wife's Uber app. So it's one of those things. It's highly personalized. It's easy to use, like you said, Nick. And today's day and age, we almost take some of them for granted.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So let's ask the second polling question to our audience. How would you rate the digital experience at work that you have, whether it's booking your vacation time or your performance management or e-learning? And I can see all of you already jumping on. Thank you very much. And obviously the questions, the choices range from it's a very poor experience to an awesome experience. And most of us are sort of falling in the middle, maybe another 3 or 4 seconds. And by the way, while we're doing this, I did neglect a little bit earlier to do some housekeeping for you in the audience watching this. You can download the slides in the middle pod that you have on your screen, and we do want you to participate in this webcast. So please type in your questions as we go throughout this webcast in the lower left-hand pod. Jump in, ask us questions, tell us what you're thinking, whether you agree or disagree, all of those sorts of things. We do want you to participate in this dialogue, so I invite you to do that. Okay, so if we can close the poll, please. And again, a very large majority will say average. This is your average digital experience at work. And maybe I'll come to Chris first. That can't be surprising,
No.
given what we see in our workplaces today.
No, it can. And I think a lot of us would probably say that just changing passwords on a number of these work-supported softwares can be a challenge. And I think nirvana for many of us would be a world in which there's only one password for all of them.
Yeah.
But to Nick's point, Netflix, Amazon, Uber, some of the items we saw in the first question, the proper word is engaging. I might say they're almost addictive. And so when we go home at night and we have some free time, or if we're decompressing on the couch, oftentimes we're pulling up one of these apps and just kind of seeing what's out there and what's going on. And what could we accomplish as L&D professionals in the learning space if we could create technologies that instead would be as addictive and engaging, but instead help people develop personally and professionally? And that's, I think, the bridge that Nick is referring to.
So let's jump into that. If we can come back to the slides, please. Thank you. So let's jump into this. It's an agenda slide, but I'll let Nick drive a little bit. Let's build on what Chris just said.
Yeah, absolutely. I think building that bridge, helping people figure out, or as an organization, trying to figure out what it is that will create that engagement and to some extent addiction to technology in the way that we are at home has been a big part of what we've looked at and a lot of the research that we've done. And in this presentation, we're really going to talk about why we are in a world where those apps have become so engaging, so popular, the world that we live in today, and really then think about how that relates to learning. So if I just start off, and it's interesting that Amazon came up as the most popular app. I promise you I didn't know that. We haven't just changed the slides. But what Amazon, and really they've been a huge part of everything that we do at Work Life Labs, because I think they really have nailed it in terms of that customer experience. And they really think about the customer, right? We all in our organizations that we work with want to be customer centric. Sometimes that's challenging. I think what Amazon do is every single thing they focus on customer first, and then they work backwards. And if you think at one story with Amazon that I think is such a cool story is the Kindle, right? So, Amazon knew that people's behaviors were changing, that they wanted to read in a different way. They had their biggest business, which was their book business, that was at threat potentially of something like a Kindle, but they knew that was the future. And when they created the Kindle, they did a lot of customer research as to what people would be prepared to pay for a book when they download it. And the consumers told them they would only pay $9.99. That's what they told them. And Amazon went to all of their publishers and said, our consumers are telling us that they're prepared not to pay $9.99, therefore you need to sell us your books for less than that. And all of the publishers said, no way, we will not do that. That's too cheap. We can't afford to do it that way. And Amazon said, if you do this, I promise we're going to sell even more books than you've ever sold before. And the publishers still said no. And Amazon took a huge gamble and decided the best way to do this was to do it and take a hit on revenue for a good 2 or 3 years. So when the Kindle first came out, as consumers, we were paying $9.99 for these books. Amazon were in fact paying more to the publishers and were losing money. And then 2 or 3 years later, they went back to those publishers and said, hey guys, we've now got millions of people downloading the books, you've got to reduce your prices or we can't buy them from you anymore. And of course they then reduce the prices. And I think the moral to that story is that customer centricity that they have, that focus on what it is, that how we're going to drive this from a customer perspective is important. Of course that's around pricing, but they do the same with one click, with the new products they add, with the mobile app, all of those things. It's a fantastic company that we look at a lot. And I think, it takes us into thinking about this whole idea that we're now, and Harvard Business Review released an article recently about how we now make decisions about the brands and the products that we buy with our hearts and our emotions, not necessarily with a kind of physical or intellectual view. And I think the best example, if you think about it, only, what was it, last week or 10 days ago when the new iPhone comes out, right? It is almost slightly insane that people will go and line up for 3 hours around the block to get a mobile phone that's not vastly different. And I don't want to do a disservice to Apple. I'm actually, I would show you, I bought it myself. I didn't get in the line, but I did buy it myself. It's not vastly different, but people queue up for hours. And the reason they queue up for hours is because they're in love. They're in love with the product. Whatever Apple release, they want to buy it. And I think, again, when we're thinking about technology and user experience and the whole idea of why people use things in today's world, it very much is about the experience that people have and that connection you make emotionally. And again, all of this information, and there's a relevance here for all of those learning professionals or HR people watching this, do your solutions have that same appeal to your employees when you release them? Now, Apple iPhone is a big ambition, right? That's kind of a wild goal that we can all work towards, but it's something that we need to be thinking about because that's what we're competing with. We're competing with people's emotional decisions around making decisions outside of work. Just because they go to work doesn't mean they switch off that emotion and think, oh, well, it's, just because it's so complicated to use all these systems, I'm still going to use them. Of course they're not. They're going to want to make sure that they have the same feeling.
Yeah. And just to build on that, I was just at a conference, and on the panel was the person who was the former head of people services from Walmart. And her choice of words was delight. So I'm hearing what you're saying, and I'm thinking through, how do we delight our customers? But in this case, also think about how do we delight our internal customers,
Absolutely.
Right? This is the term that I now hear. How do we delight our internal customers and our employees?
Exactly.
And to bring out that passion and the interest, all of those things, the emotional pull that you just talked
Agreed. About. And just because they're internal, doesn't mean they're not customers. I think that's a really important part. And work and life are becoming so intertwined, right? Our mobile phones have made us take work everywhere we go. And therefore, distinguishing when you're at work and when you're at home is becoming different. And therefore, distinguishing your emotions and your pull towards certain things is becoming very difficult to separate, which is why people get more and more frustrated at work with some of the systems that we use. I think 25% of people on that poll or so rated it as poor or average. I hope there's no CTOs or CIOs on this webcast, but that's a big challenge for companies because they end up spending more time on compliance and getting individuals to just use the darn system than they do on actually getting the value of those systems.
Yeah.
And I think, what does this mean? It means how can we create products and services as learning professionals that people are emotionally interested in? And the other part of this, if you think about Amazon is a really good example, or even Uber, there are multiple layers of value to these services and these products that we buy at home. It's not just about buying one thing, or Amazon isn't just about the user experience you have with one click. The other value is you if you're using Prime, you get it the next day. As in Uber, they're creating value not just for the rider, but also for the driver. Uber have probably created hundreds of thousands of jobs around the world. Their platform has created multiple levels of value. So again, when we're thinking about learning, what value are you providing to the employees at work.
Yeah, and knowing what to train people on is just part of the challenge. I mean, we were with the CHRO recently, and they've identified 5 behaviors that if each one of their hundreds of salespeople would embrace, these 5 behaviors would drive top-line revenue growth. And that's a big aha for a lot of us in learning. But how do you get them to then engage with an e-learning tool or a coach or a role-play exercise that's then going to have them be excited about learning these behaviors, but then embracing them and using them? And so as Nick put, you can make it about compliance and say, hey, requirement in big capital letters, everybody must join this webinar. But we all know that's not going to work most of the time. You have to create something that people are going to engage with and really enjoy on a personal level.
Great. Let's keep going.
Yeah, I mean, let's look at kind of just again, and we're going to move into learning in a moment, but just to kind of go over this again, you know, how has consumer expectations changed, right? So, you know, it's happened everywhere. If we look at Amazon in the e-commerce space, which we've talked about, and how you can get groceries immediately the next day served right to where you want them. Television, you know, you typically get home. I think Netflix was quite popular on there. I think it was the second most used application. You know, there's the buffering speeds are now non-existent. You get home, you switch on, you can watch whatever movie you want. You know, Netflix has become so clever that no longer are we flicking around for half an hour. I think we've all done that, just flicked. You know, it basically knows what you like, and it suggests 3 or 4 things that you're going to really enjoy to watch. So it's helping you make a decision, and it's a phenomenal application. And we're probably watching more content now than we ever have done before. Food, for me, I'm from the UK, and in the UK we have an app called Deliveroo. I think in the US you have DoorDash, and in New York you have Seamless. You know, being able to order the food that you want at the time that you want it is now a given, right? You know, only 2 or 3 years ago, if you wanted your favorite meal, you had to wait or they didn't deliver. Now it's like, well, of course they deliver. If they don't deliver, that's just crazy. You know, I want something to eat and my friend wants something different. We can order from different restaurants and get them both time to arrive at the same time. We're very spoiled as consumers. We are becoming so spoiled when we're at home. You know, I think about, and we're becoming conditioned. One quick story. A few weeks ago, I was in Los Angeles and I needed to get a taxi back to the airport. And there were no Ubers available. I'm a big Uber fan, right? There were all Uber surcharge was crazy, and I just thought, you know what, I'm going to hail a normal taxi. So I got in a normal taxi, and I arrive at the airport, and I get out of the taxi, and I just walked into the airport. And the taxi driver starts shouting, "You haven't paid." And of course, I didn't. It's not that I wanted to get away from paying, by the way. And of course, I went back and paid. But I walked back into the airport, and I thought, you know, I have become so conditioned now that having to get money out of my wallet and pay for something is a bit of a pain. And I didn't even think about it. And if I'm doing that in that scenario, in years to come, how else are we going to do it? And then again, taking it back into work, expecting people to fill in forms, fill in surveys, take 18 clicks to book a day's annual leave or PTO. We're being very unrealistic if we think people are going to do that. And of course, as the younger generation come through, this problem is going to become even more and more difficult. So I think what we've talked about in these first 3 slides is really about you know, that UX, that user experience at home shouldn't be different to the user experience you have at work, and how do we make that happen?
Right, and that's of course a huge challenge, right, for HR organizations and companies at large to simulate those experiences from the outside into the inside.
Absolutely.
But we do see a lot of organizations taking on that challenge.
Absolutely.
They are transforming. So let's jump into more examples of how that's happening.
Yeah, and I think, you know, again, you know, in the transport space, in the medicine space, which is kind of getting closer towards this workspace. So we've talked about, you know, shopping and transport, and we're not going to go on about that again. Looking at medicine and apps like, you know, Doctors on Demand or Talkspace, you know, where you can now get therapy or be able to see a doctor using a FaceTime, Skype type technology is becoming much more comfortable for us. You know, as I walked here from our offices in New York, and I was watching people FaceTiming on the sidewalk. That didn't happen 2 or 3 years ago. Technology has become much better that enables us to connect to people through video in a much more seamless way, and we're now seeing applications around the medicine space where we can now see a doctor within 5 minutes if we want to, and get support. In the learning space, we're just not quite there. And I think, to your point, it's not easy either. You have thousands of people in an organization spread across multiple geographies with huge compliance and GDPR challenges. How do you create systems with those barriers to making it work? But I've got to tell you, a lot of these companies would have had similar challenges as well around how to create them. I think it's a mindset shift to what we said at the beginning, which is thinking about our people as customers, thinking about how are they going to react to this? Well, how are they going to engage with it? Not just about the content. Both things are as important. Content is key, but getting people to that content in a seamless way is just as much. So if we look at just look back a bit at the learning landscape and how it's changed, not that long ago, and I say before because this still exists, but not that long ago, you were sent to a course 2 or 3 times a year. You'd go there for 2 or 3 days. I spent 3 years ago, I spent a week in the mountains in Switzerland. It was a fantastic week. I learned a lot. I learned a lot about myself.
You learned how to ski.
Yeah, I learned how to ski. And also, we believed very much that it had to be face-to-face, face-to-face, in person. And there is huge value for that, by the way. I think face-to-face, in person is critical. Again, and this might be controversial, but a lot of the value from the face-to-face stuff in the end becomes more about networking and building relationships than it does actually about the content, which is a separate point, but just quite interesting around what that value is of bringing people together. I think today learning is becoming a lot more bite-sized. I think we are appreciating that people's attention spans are far less, and getting someone to concentrate for 3 or 4 hours in a workshop is very, very difficult. That's just natural evolution of where we are. So things are becoming more bite-sized. Things are becoming more virtual. Technology works much more effectively. So we are starting to see this shift. And I think for our millennial population, of which it's close to 50% of most organizations, and in a few years it will be the majority of every organization, people are much more used to this. And millennials' attention spans are even less than what we have today. So, we're going to have to really work on this. So how and what's happening in the learning space is interesting, right? I think one of the interesting markets that we looked at Work Life Labs, and it's not a business that we're in, is the engagement survey space. I think everyone on this call, and I'm sure you've been involved, Amy, as well, has been involved in engagement surveys. And I, years ago, used to work for a very large engagement survey provider. And in those days, there were 3 or 4 very big engagement survey providers, big global consulting firms, provided fantastic data, provided fantastic expertise. And now, when you go and you look for an engagement survey provider, the landscape is very different, right? The companies that are in this space, that are winning, are focused just as much on getting people to fill in the survey as they are about the results, because they say, and they're right, there's no point in having all of this great survey if only 30% of people fill it in. So UX is critical, and the other part that they say is getting results immediately is even more important, right? So all of these firms provide fantastic results immediately and give great data to organizations, but it's so different to how this was 3 years ago. And my point here is that this space has really changed. I think this space is really working in terms of understanding what customers want and building out products like that. I think we're seeing it in e-learning, LinkedIn Learning, Coursera, Degreed. All of these systems are becoming more intuitive, less clunky, still not where they need to be. I think a lot of these platforms, if you speak to learning professionals, 6, 12 months on, are people still really engaging with them? They engage at the beginning, and they're still really engaging them up at the end. So, I'm not going to bash any of these systems, but does it feel like Netflix? Does it really, they say they do, but are people using it in the same way they're using Netflix a year, 18 months on? I think there's still some work to be done. And then you have a lot of thought leadership firms, and thought leadership firms probably stand somewhere quite different. There are companies that are really expert in their field, providing great leadership development. Lee Hecht Harrison and Lee Hecht Harrison Penner in the UK and Lee Hecht Harrison Knightsbridge, are definitely in that space. But again, how can we digitize that? So I think that's something that we've looked at. I think we have some questions, so happy to pause.
No, thank you for that. Actually, I want to thank the audience. It's actually not so many questions. They're talking to each other.
Okay.
And I really want to thank the audience. They're asking each other questions and they're learning from each other.
Fantastic.
It's fantastic.
One of the comments that I saw was around e-learning
Yes.
providers, and so you saw a number of the brands there. But in that space, Nick, what's your perspective and perception on a lot of that content? It's great, but it's a bit overwhelming. In my experience, it doesn't seem like it's very personalized, and then the challenge of relevance too. I don't know what you're seeing.
Yeah, I think it's a great point. I think relevance is so important, right? If we want to find out about the latest thinking around how I can manage a difficult conversation, and I go onto one of these platforms, there's probably 25, 30 different things for me to look at. And sometimes I can also get to that point and just say, you know what, I can't, it's overwhelming, I can't see, I'm not going to look. So providing people with that relevant information at the moment that they need it in a really simple format is where this business needs to go. And I still think that a lot of these platforms have so much content. It's almost like the winner's going to have the most content. And I think for me, the winner's going to serve up the content at the right time in the most relevant way. And I think, again, it's something we look at, and we're going to talk a bit about some examples later. It's something we look at as to how to make this work, but it's not easy. Really intuitive, being able to understand your calendar and serve you up the content at the moment that you need it is where this business needs to go in e-learning. I think right now it's still, as you say, very, very overwhelming.
And it's funny you say the winner's going to be the person with the most content, because when any one of these firms comes in and pitches to us as OD and learning professionals, hey, please use our firm, we're the right firm for you, given all of the learning needs that your people have, the first slide of the sales pitch is more than likely, we have 5,000 courses or we have X many hours. And to your point, I don't want to be overwhelmed with options and choices. I instead want to see something that's going to be very relevant to me.
Absolutely. Relevance is key.
That's a huge point for learning professionals, right? We are totally used to figuring out how many courses we need, how much curriculum we need, how much volume, how many variations, and we know how to do this, right? Yeah. This is our background, this is what we do. But it's really challenging, like you said. It's about the personalization of the learning. It's not about the volume. So maybe less is more in this case, right? But it's presenting it at the right time, at the right place, and to the right person. And how do we get there? Of course, this has AI all over it, right? But it's really a challenge for us to think through that, to be like that Netflix, right? Customers, internal and external, really do expect that now. Yeah. And how do we turn that from our big, large applications and learning catalogs, right? We've all been through those, where you can't find anything, or I should say you can't find anything you actually want. Yeah. And how do we get from that to a personalized, individualized learning touch point? Yeah. I love that. Yeah. And how do we, but that's a huge different mindset. Yeah. That's very, very different.
And people want choice. Let's not get it twisted, especially the current generation that's now elevating themselves through the workforce. People want options, right? But they don't want to be overwhelmed with options. At some point, to what Nick's example, your eyes glaze over and you go to doing something else.
Yeah. And it's something we're working on. We're working at Work Life Labs to figure out how to serve up great content to people at the time that they need it, that is absolutely relevant to them and their situation. Right. We don't have the perfect solution today. I think some of the stuff that Chris is going to talk about in a few minutes is definitely getting us there. But it's something that we think is the nirvana that we're searching for. And I think, and it was only recent that I think Josh Burson said, the learning that we have, again, needs to be employee-centric. I think he mentions here even DoorDash, right? Getting the food that you want when you need it. Getting the learning that you want when you need it is critical. And I think that is something that we at Work Life Labs have this vision for, and are working really, really hard to make that happen. So I think, all of this, and I'm going to kind of summarize really, all of what we're talking about here is what does learning need to be? So I think, one of the takeaways for everyone listening is don't think that, there's a business to consumer mindset and there's an internal learning mindset. We need to be thinking about our employees as consumers because they have choice. By the way, their phones give them that choice, right? We know we can't tell people not to be on their phone, and getting them to come off Instagram and go onto our e-learning platform is something that we have to face, right? That's the reality. They are doing that. We are competing with these amazing user experiences. So the mindset shift is think of them as consumers. What's going to engage them? How are we going to communicate these programs? How are we going to make them sexy in the same way that, the consumer platforms make them sexy? Because that is what we're competing with. And the other thing is make it relevant, make it relevant to the individual's context. One of the challenges we have with any group work is that, and we have to do group work, and Lee Hecht Harrison, by the way, has a fantastic offering in group work. But one of the challenges with it is there's always some level of compromise, because if Chris and I are part of a group, Chris is fantastic at certain things that I'm not, and therefore when we're in that group, you're going to be more switched on in times when I'm not. And that's one of the challenges we have. So how can we make everything so relevant to the individual? Using technology is a fantastic tool to help us that. And obviously at the time that people need it. I think that too many times are we told now, Nick, there's a course coming up in 3 weeks' time on Friday at midday, at noon, you've got to go and be there for 4 hours. That's not convenient for me. That I might be away, I might not work, it might not be relevant to me. That's not how I work at home. That's not how my home life works. So we need to make it relevant from a time as well. So I think, to summarize, they're really critical when we're thinking about solutions for the future. And we're going to show you an example in a moment of a solution that we think starts to address some of these challenges and has addressed some of these challenges in the last year. But I think any solution that people are thinking of, ask yourself these questions. Is it relevant? Does it have a great user experience? And is it timely? Does it give people what they want when they need it?
So I'd love to hear the example. I know that Chris is going to bring us into just a great example of how it could be done, right? But before we do that, I did wanted to ask an audience question. So again, thanks to the audience. You guys are learning and teaching and embracing each other, so I love it. But the question around the content that we were just talking about, how are either other companies helping, maybe like a consulting firms helping other companies, or the companies themselves internally? Do you have any examples or thoughts of ideas of how they can figure out how to manage this volume of content better? Do you have any examples or thoughts, or how do we get started? How do we manage this course catalog that we have of thousands of things? What should we be thinking about or doing?
Choices. I think choices is critical, right? So, we as organizations need to be curators of this content. So if you think about an organization, we're working with an organization right now who have a very strong vision about how behaviorally they want to be in the future. They have a new framework. This is how they want their business to be. And, it's quite simple, but they take a lot of that content and they have to make choices around what is the most relevant video, what is the most relevant lesson that aligns with their organization. And I think that's not easy either, because the easiest thing to do is say, you know what, all 20 of those things are relevant. So we'll just leave all 20 on, and then people have the choice. I think, and one of my colleagues talks about this idea of a tyranny of choice. When you're given 20 things to look at, you won't make a decision. When you're given 1 or 2 or even 3 choices, you can make a decision. So again, that's a consumer psychology thing. When you buy anything right now, that you generally get 2 or 3 choices. At the moment, we're giving people 20 choices. So what we're seeing our customers do is curate that content to really filter out and squeeze down that. It's not easy, but you've got to make those decisions.
No, great option. I didn't want to build on that.
Well, yeah, the only other thing I would say is that what works, we all work for large organizations. So what works for Amy isn't going to work for Nick, and it's not going to work for Chris. So how organizations are able to granulate some of the content and aim it at certain people, with whether it be working in a certain function or working within a particular business unit, is going to be important. There isn't a one-size-fits-all approach, especially when we have many different generations that are all working in the workforce.
So let me sort of rephrase what you both said. We have a lot of content, and it's not necessarily about needing a lot of money or investment to curate, but it's being thoughtful and
Around
intentional about the creation, and how do we somehow present up a curation that's very helpful, targeted, specific for either roles, purposes, or skill sets, competencies, etc. But being very thoughtful and intentional about it, and that's not something that necessarily takes a lot of money. So I guess I want to sort of emphasize that, because we often think, oh, we're underinvested, we don't have enough money, or we need some new amazing platform technology that costs $1 gazillion.
Exactly.
And that's not always the case, right? Would new technologies help? Sure. But not always the case. Yeah. So let's move on, just in the interest of time, jump into the example, if you would, Chris.
I think do we have a poll coming up?
Did I?
I think it's the next slide.
Oh, it's the next one, yes.
Yeah, so one of the things that we'll talk about as part of our example is around coaching and why it is so effective. It's highly personalized, it's incredibly impactful, and oftentimes it can be delivered by somebody who's walked in the shoes of that particular leader. So I think we have a poll question next.
Okay. So if the control room can share the polling with our audience, who gets professional coaching at your company? Is it everyone? All managers, high potentials, and execs, or just the execs? So again, thank you to the audience for jumping in here and putting in your response. And maybe for 3 more seconds, and if the control room can close it out. So, not surprisingly, a very large majority of 60% high potentials and execs, as well as just executives, right? So this is consistent with what we see with coaching investments today, which is that it's really for the very top and for the few. And however, we all know the benefits of coaching. I think the industry overall and HR overall has really embraced and recognized the value of coaching for many people in many instances, or many situations, I should say. But yet we do see, for the most part, that it's the very few and the very top that have access to this type of benefit. So if we can go back to our slides, please.
Yeah. Sure, thanks, Amy. So, not surprising to hear some of the audience reaction there and the poll results there. A little bit more than a year ago, Nick and the Work Life Labs team went out to more than 60 CHROs and asked a question more along the lines of, if you could provide your people any sort of a development activity, what would it be and why? Overwhelmingly, people came back and said, we'd provide them with a coach. It was by far the most popular choice. When you peel back a layer of that onion, you say, okay, well, why? It's personalized and relevant. It's confidential. It's a safe space for people to talk about what's really bothering them. Overwhelmingly, people come back and tell me, as the HR leader, that the coaching engagement has been incredibly effective. It's made an impact. It's changed my behavior, and it's accelerating my business results. So that's all fun and dandy. But then we said, okay, why aren't you then providing coaching to everyone? And so I'm sure many people are at home listening, or in the office listening to this, and they're probably yelling at the screen, it's the price. So you're seeing here, we reference scalability, which is really a sexy way of saying price. Oftentimes, 6-month coaching engagements can go anywhere from $20,000 to $25,000, and that's a big part of the reason why on the previous, in the poll question we had there, about 87% of our respondents are saying, hey, coaching only happens with high pos and execs. So what you're saying is the best development activity that we all, as HR leaders, believe can drive behavior change and really accelerate development, we're only giving that to a very small portion of our audience. And so what's happening to what's the rest of the organization having, and what are they going to have access to? So scalability and providing coaches to everyone is something that we see as very important as we think about what the future of learning at work is going to be. Additionally, accessibility is a a challenge. It's hard to find good coaches and match them up with good leaders. You know, your insurance leader in New York, well, the best coach for that person might be somebody that's based in Denver, Colorado. So how do you connect your leaders back to coaches and really have a good coaching fit? Lastly, and this was something that I think really puzzled us, was HR would say, I really don't have a lot of analytics, insight, or a transparency into what the ROI is of a coaching engagement. I select the coaches, I sign the contract, I pay the bill, but then I don't hear about how the coaching engagement is going until something goes wrong or until somebody asks for an extension on the coaching agreement. And so I don't know how many sessions have happened. Is behavior change really happening? I'm spending all of this money. What is it getting me? And so what Nick's team at Work Life Labs has done is they've really created something that works for the modern world, and we think stands as a very nice example as to how you can accelerate personal and professional development to really achieve enhanced business results. Now, Nick's team refers to their solution as Ezra. We refer to it as Ezra. And the mission and the vision for Ezra is that something, finally a technology and a learning solution that can scale coaching to the masses. Ezra loosely translates to, in Hebrew and the Greek language, as to help. Of course, coaching is all about helping. And if all of you at home or in the office or in the privacy of a cubicle, if you kind of tilt your head to the left and look at the A in Ezra, you'll see it's a question mark. So maybe one day our team will just be the question mark, almost like the Nike swoosh or the golden arches of McDonald's. It can be a dream. But as we all know, coaching is all about asking questions, right? It's about asking those questions to drive the leader on a path of self-discovery and self-awareness to really drive behavior change and enhance business results. So what does this look like? I think, Nick, you talk so much about a simple user experience. And in Bezos' most recent book, he mentions the fact that if you can't get to it within 4 clicks, you're going to lose people's attention span. And so hopefully, as we walk through this, everyone at home and in the office will see a very simple user experience. So Ezra is a mobile-based technology that can be downloaded from the Apple App Store or the Google Play Store. We oftentimes work with OD leaders at an enterprise level who want to cascade access to a bunch of individuals in the organization and leaders who need and want coaching. We then allow the leader to select 3 goals to work on. Now, these goals can be, in the era of personalization, customization, and relevance, these can be completely customized. We even have some clients who have multiple different cohorts going through an Ezra coaching program and have, I would say, upwards of 9 different sets of goals. There might be some overlap, but Amy, if you're in an Elevating Women in Leadership development program and I'm in a high potential program, there may be some similarities there, but it's going to be very different, the types of development goals we're going to be working on. Then we let them pick their coach. So in an era of curation, from a content perspective, as we talked about earlier, it's important that you really curate a very good bench of coaches that are going to be put in front of your leaders. And so here at LHH, we're very proud and very pleased to have more than 2,000 coaches around the world that we can choose from. But even then, we sit down with our clients and we let them select who's going to be on the bench of coaches for the particular coaching engagement. There isn't a tyranny of choice here. We do give them, maybe it is a tyranny of choice. We do give them 3 options. We don't tell them who the coach is going to be. And we provide some information behind each one of those 3 options. A brief bio, some quotes and ratings from other people who have been coached by this leader before. And then, in the essence of people wanting things when and where they want it, we let them schedule in, hook up directly to the coach's schedule. This alleviates any annoying back and forth as to when Helen as the coach is available. And then the coaching happens all on your phone within a solution, looking very much like a video chat. I'm not going to, I often joke with people, my kids know how to FaceTime with their grandkids. So this looks very similar to me as almost like an Apple iPhone FaceTime experience, but really a very simple video chat technology.
Okay.
And then similar to Uber and Amazon, as soon as your experience is done, how do you then gather that feedback and understand, has the coaching worked? Is it driving the types of behavior change? Is it going to help us accelerate our business results? You then are able to ask the coachee a few questions around how the session went. And similar to Uber, we also, on the back end, ask the coach a few questions. around what they thought. Is Amy engaged in the coaching exercise? Is she developing towards those business goals? What are some of the coaching themes and insights you're starting to hear that are playing out maybe amongst Amy or even other leaders in the organization you're coaching that we should be elevating up and bubbling up to leadership? So really, hopefully, a very clean and crisp user experience.
So Chris, I'm loving the story, and just because we don't have that much time left, I wanted to make sure I understand that. So this app allows me in a very personalized way connect with a real life coach. This is not a chat bot, right? Mm-hmm. And get as many coaching engagements or conversations that I'm looking for in the scheduling that I want. And of course I get to choose and highlight some people that I might want. Or can you choose different coaches, try different coaches? Or do you stay with one, or how does that work?
So the design of the experience is that you stay with one coach. So this alleviates some of that, communicating to a new person every time you hop on the phone. Hey, what my organizational and personal context is. What are some of the team dynamics? But you can certainly try different coaches. But it's interesting, and that's often a question we get from clients. But the time that we spend with HR and with our clients, and I think also just a reference to how strong our coaching bench is, if I may say so. Very rarely do we see bad coaching matches. It actually happens less than 2% of the time. Will somebody raise their hand and say, this isn't, Amy's my coach and she's great, but this isn't a good match between us. Mm-hmm. We often jokingly refer to it as the no-fault divorce. It's not any one person's fault, it's just not a good match. So that happens. But yeah, it is designed in a very personalized, safe space. It's confidential, as we all know. Our coaching process is ICF certified, so we never break the bounds of confidentiality of a coaching engagement. But yeah, and it's your coach for the entirety of the engagement. You can have as many, and we tell people they can have as many sessions as they want. What we see is people are typically having around 2 to 3 sessions a month that go from anywhere from 50 minutes to even in some cases more than an hour. And so really powerful behavior change that people are engaging with and then coming back to multiple times over the course of a 3, 6, or 12-month period. And so really it can give you some insight into that ROI. Okay, I've now provided this to people, but are they using it? And are they seeing value in it?
I like the interaction and combination of technology and real life people, right? Exactly. Because while some coaching might be able to be done over technology, at the end of the day, it is still about human interaction.
It's very personal.
It's very personal, and so taking that out, I think, would be challenging. So I appreciate the interaction between the two.
Yeah, and we looked at that when we built this tool. We looked a lot at, could this be a robot? Because there are some platforms out there where a robot will coach someone, but the overwhelming feedback is that there are, amazing professional coaches out there. There's huge organizations like the ICF. This is a very important thing. So in the end, a technology-enabled solution is where we came to, and that's what this is. It's combining world-class expertise from the Lee Hecht Harrison coaches across the world with world-class user experience and apps that we've just been talking about to give that very personalized, relevant, timely coaching support in an even more relevant way. And of course, there's a lot more to this platform that we could talk about if we had hours, but I think in this short space of time, we're really getting the points across.
But scalability was the key challenge, and one of the key challenges we wanted to address. And part of scalability is price, and so a big key part of this was really bringing that price point down so that HR leaders can say, I can scale this out to 100 of my frontline managers because it's now at an appropriate price point.
So I was going to say, let me let you finish off the last 1 or 2 slides just in the interest of time. Obviously, scalability and figuring out how we can broaden the benefits and value of coaching. And just FYI, I do see from the audience, there's a lot of tactical questions, and we won't have time to get into it. But
and that's okay.
That's okay, but I'm sure there'll be opportunity to follow up. But there's a ton of tactical questions, everything about experimentation, testing, costs, where can they try it out, multiple languages, the endless amount of great questions. So thank you to the audience. But let me let you finish up and summarize this just in the interest of time.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And we'd love to hear from you, and we'll certainly connect with the audience. Please, check us out at helloezra.com. You'll certainly see more about the app there. But it's been, in closing, one of the things I would say is we commercialized the solution earlier this year. We're working with some of the best companies in the world. And, I reflect back on Nick's bio. How can you really engage people and elevate them to be the best version of themselves and also really enjoy the work experience. And we've started to peel back the layers of the onion on that over the summer and even now into the fall, and it's been a lot of fun, and it's something that we're really passionate about. I'm sure our audience is also passionate about.
I think it's just a fantastic example, right? I'm sure there are many other examples, but this is just a really great example for our learning profession. Yeah. And I love the bringing into coaching because I'm a really big coaching person as well, right? So it's not just about learning or just about e-learning or going to a classroom, right? There's a very personalized way to learn, and what could be more personalized than coaching? And having somebody who's a expert and trained in this way to help you see things that perhaps you haven't seen yourself. Yeah. Right? And there were questions from the audience about the difference between coaching and mentoring, and thank you to the other audience members that were answering those questions.
It's a big difference.
It's a big difference, right? And we won't have as much time to get into that, but having a coach or somebody who will continue to ask you questions to get you to think and get you to pause and get you to reflect, I mean, those are invaluable, right? We don't get a lot of those opportunities in today's world. So I can really see some of that value and the technology helping us to scale this value. Absolutely. Right? That's the missing piece that we've been really, we've always known coaching for the very top and for the very most senior executives, but how do we bring it down to everybody?
Yeah. We call it a superpower, right? Coaching is a superpower.
Sure.
I've had a coach for a while, and it's been incredibly powerful for me and my career. And one of our visions early on was, how can we let everyone, or at least all managers in an organization to start with, have this fantastic superpower? Because to Chris's point, it makes a massive difference. It maximizes people's potential, and the whole journey and mission was making this available for even more people than just that very top executive. So it's been a great journey so far, and as we said, this is just an example of everything that we talked about in the first part of this presentation, making it relevant, fantastic user experience, and really making it timely, and personalized. So it's been a good journey.
Yeah, no, it's great, and I just love this example to see the evolution of the trends, right? Mm-hmm. That we all need to pay attention to as HR professionals. Is technology going to supplement coaching? Sure. Will it supplement learning? Sure. Will it supplement succession planning? Sure. Will it supplement talent acquisition? Absolutely. Right. So it's really figuring out the technology in our lives, in our professions, and how we're going to integrate all of this, because it's happening. Lots of companies are doing lots of great things. So I just really wanted to thank you for sharing with us today just another great example of companies doing some really great things. And as we see the world evolve, it's a great time to be in HR.
Yeah,
right? That's what I say. It's great. And so we are pretty much out of time, but I really wanted to thank the audience because you have just absolutely been chatting and engaging and learning and sharing. So I've been delighted to just watch and look at the different comments that have been going on. We do have follow-up, a quick slide. Again, you can download these slides in the middle pod. So if you wanted to follow up with Nick and Chris, or at the website that Chris mentioned, helloezra.com, just to check it out, right? Whether this is the right app for everybody or not, we're going to experiment, and that's what I think is so fabulous. We need to experiment and figure out what we need to do to evolve our practice and so to better support our internal employees and customers. And finally, with that, I just want to invite all of you to continue to join us at some of the upcoming conferences that we have with the conference board. We look to continue. We actually, by the way, have not only a Learning and Development Summit, but we also have an AI in the Workplace Summit coming up, where we talk about the interactions of technology and HR and what we're doing in this space and what companies are doing in this space. So lots of things going on. We need to continue to be self-directed learners and lifelong learners. So we encourage you to join us in that way. So let me then first close out. Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Nick. Fabulous conversation, expanding our minds, looking at new technologies, new ways to think of things. So thank you very much for joining me for today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you to the audience. Again, I'm Amy Abel with the conference board. Really appreciate your participation. I believe an evaluation screen will come up at the end. It takes 2 seconds. Let us know. Let us know your thoughts. Let us know how we did. And if we can enhance these webcasts for you in the future, we greatly appreciate it. Thank you so much for your time today, and we'll see you at the next webcast.